Book 23, Part 2 of the Iliad of Homer, rendered into English blank verse by Edward, Earl of Derby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Your reader, Michael Armenta. Meanwhile, the chieftains, seated in the ring, looked for the cars that scoured the dusty plain. The first to see them was Idomeneus, the Cretan king, for he, without the ring, was posted high aloft, and from afar he heard and knew the foremost horseman's voice. Well too he knew the gallant horse that led, all baying the rest, but on his front alone a star of white, full orbed as the moon. Then up he rose, and thus the Greeks addressed: "O friends, the chiefs and counsellors of Greece, can ye too see, or I alone, the cars? A different chariot seems to me in front, a different charioteer, and they who first were leading must have met with some mischance. I saw them late, ere around the goal they turned, but see them now no more, though all around my eyes explore the wide-spread plain of Troy. Perhaps the charioteer has dropped the reins, or round the goal he could not hold the mares. Perchance has missed the turn, and on the plain is lying now beside his broken car, while from the course his mettled steeds have flown. Stand up and look yourselves, I cannot well distinguish, but to me it seems a chief who reigns o'er the Greeks, though of Aetolian race, the son of Tydeus, valiant Diomed." Sharply Oileus' active son replied: "Idomeneus, why thus before the time so rashly speak, while the high-stepping steeds are speeding yet across the distant plain? Thine eyes are not the youngest in the camp, nor look they out the sharpest from thy head, but thou art ever hasty in thy speech, and ill becomes thee this precipitance. Since others are there here, thy betters far. The same are leading now, that led at first, Eumelus' mares. 'Tis he that holds the reins." To whom in anger thus the Cretan chief: "Ajax, at wrangling good, in judgment not; and for aught else, among the chiefs of Greece, of small account, so stubborn is thy soul. Wilt thou a tripod or a cauldron stake, and Agamemnon, Atreus' son, appoint the umpire to decide whose steeds are first? So shalt thou gain thy knowledge at thy cost." He said. Up sprang Oileus' active son, in anger to reply, and farther yet had gone the quarrel. But Achilles' self stood up, and thus the rival chiefs addressed: "Forbear both, Ajax and Idomeneus, this bitter interchange of wordy war. It is not seemly, and yourselves, I know, another would condemn who so should speak. But stay ye here, and seated in the ring, their coming wait. Then, hurrying to the goal, we'll soon be here, and then shall each man know whose horses are the second, whose the first." Thus said. But Tydeus' son drew near, his lash still laid upon his horse's shoulder points, as lightly They, high-stepping, scoured the plain. Still on the charioteer the dust was flung, as close upon the flying-footed steeds followed the car with gold and tin inlaid, and lightly, as they flew along, were left impressed the wheel tracks on the sandy plain. There in the midst he stood, the sweat profuse downpouring from his horses' heads and chests. Down from the glittering car he leaped to earth, and leaned his whip against the chariot yoke. Nor long delayed the valiant Sthenelus, but eagerly sprang forth to claim the prize. Then to his brave companions gave in charge to lead away the woman, and to bear the tripod, while himself unyoked the steeds. Next came the horses of Antilochus, who had, by stratagem and not by speed, o'er Menelaus triumph'd. Yet e'en so Atrides' flying coursers press'd him hard, for but so far as from the chariot wheel a horse, when harness'd to a royal car, whose tail, back streaming, with the utmost hairs, brushes the felloes close before the wheel, small space between, he scours the wide-spread plain. So far was Menelaus in the rear of Nestor's son. At first a discus cast between them lay, but rapidly his ground gained, so well the speed and courage served of Ithae, Agamemnon's beauteous mare. And but a little farther were the course, had passed him by, nor left the race in doubt. Behind the noble son of Atreus came, a jav'lin's flight apart, Meriones, the faithful follower of Idomeneus. His were the slowest horses, and himself the least experienced in the rapid race. Dragging his broken car, came last of all, his horses driven in front, Admetus' son. Achilles, swift of foot, with pity saw, and to the Greeks his winged words address'd. See where the best of all the last appears, but let him take, as meet, the second prize. The first belongs of right to Tydeus' son. Thus he. They all assented to his words, and by the general voice of Greece, the mare had now been his. But noble Nestor's son, Antilochus, stood up his right to claim, and to Achilles Peleus' son replied: Achilles, thou wilt do me grievous wrong, if thou thy words accomplish. For my prize thou tak'st away, because mishap befell his car and horses, by no fault of his. Yet had he to the Immortals made his prayer, he surely had not thus been last of all. But pitying him, if so thy mind incline, thy tents contain good store of gold and brass and sheep, and female slaves, and noble steeds. For him, of these hereafter mayst thou take a prize of higher value, or e'en now, and with the applause of all. But for the mare I will not give her up, and let who will stand forth. My own right hand shall guard my prize." He said, and smiled Achilles, swift of foot, delighted, for he loved the noble youth to whom his winged words he thus address'd: "Antilochus, if such be thy request, that for Eumelus I should add a prize, and to him I give my breastplate, from Asteropaeus won, of brass, around whose edge is roll'd a stream of shining tin, a gift of goodly price." He said, and bade Automedon, his friend and comrade, bring the breastplate from his tent. He went and brought it. In Eumelus' hand he placed it. He with joy the gift received. Then Menelaus, sad at heart, arose, burning with wrath against Antilochus. And while the herald in the monarch's hand his royal sceptre placed, and bade the Greeks keep silence, thus the godlike hero spoke: "Antilochus, till now reputed wise, what hast thou done? Thou hast impugned my skill, and sham'd my horses, who hast brought thine own, inferior far, before them to the goal. But come, ye chiefs and councillors of Greece, judge ye between us, favouring neither side, that none of all the brass-clad Greeks may say that Menelaus hath by false reports o'erborne Antilochus, and holds his prize, his horses fairly worsted, and himself triumphant only by superior power. Or come now, I myself will judgment give, nor deem I any Greek will find to blame in my decision, for 'tis fair and just. Antilochus, come forward, noble chief, and standing, as 'tis meet, before the car and horses, in thy hand the slender whip, wherewith thou drov'st, upon the horses lay thy hand, and by earth-shaking Neptune swear, that not of malice, and by set design, thou didst by fraud impede my chariot's course." To whom Antilochus with prudent speech: "Have patience with me yet, for I, O King, O Menelaus, am thy junior far. My elder and superior thee I own. Thou know'st the o'er-eager vehemence of youth, how quick in temper, and in judgment weak. Set then thy heart at ease. The mare I won I freely give, and if aught else of mine thou shouldst desire, would sooner give it all, than all my life be lower'd, illustrious King, in thine esteem, and sin against the Gods." Thus saying, noble Nestor's son led forth, and placed in Menelaus' hands the mare. The monarch's soul was melted, like the dew which glitters on the ears of growing corn that bristle o'er the plain. E'en so thy soul, O Menelaus, melted at his speech, to whom were thus addressed thy winged words: "Antilochus, at once I lay aside my anger. Thou art prudent, and not apt to be thus led astray. But now thy youth thy judgment hath o'erpower'd. Seek not henceforth by trickery o'er thine elders to prevail. To any other man of all the Greeks I scarce so much had yielded, but for that thyself hast labour'd much, and much endur'd, thou, thy good sire, and brother, in my cause. I yield me to thy prayers, and give to boot the mare, though mine of right. I am not of a harsh, unyielding mood." He said, and to Noemon gave in charge, the faithful comrade of Antilochus, the mare. Himself the glittering cauldron took. Of gold 2 talents to the fourth assigned, fourth in the race Meriones received. Still the fifth prize, a vase with double cup, remained. Achilles this to Nestor gave before the assembled Greeks, as thus he spoke: "Take this, old man, and for an heirloom keep, in memory of Patroclus' funeral games, whom thou no more amid the Greeks shalt see. Freely I give it thee, for thou no more canst box, or wrestle, or in sportive strife the javelin throw, or race with flying feet; for age with heavy hand hath bowed thee down." He said, and placed it in his hand. The old man received with joy the gift, and thus replied: "All thou hast said, my son, is simple truth. No firmness now my limbs and feet retain, nor can my arms, with freedom, as of old, straight from the shoulder, right and left, strike out. Oh, that such youth and vigour yet were mine, as when the Epeans in Buprasium held the royal Amarynceus' funeral games, and when the monarch's sons his prizes gave. Then could not one of all the Epean race, or Pylians, or Aetolians, vie with me. In boxing, Clytomedes, Enops' son, I vanquish'd. Then Anchius, who stood up to wrestle with me, I with ease o'erthrew. Iphiclus I outran, though fleet of foot. In hurling with the spear, with Phyleus strove, and Polydorus, and surpass'd them both. The sons of Actor in the chariot race alone o'ercame me, as in number more, and grudging more my triumph, since remain'd this contest to reward the richest prize. They were twin brothers; one who held the reins still drove and drove, the other plied the whip. Such was I once, but now must younger men engage in deeds like these, and I, the chief of heroes once, must bow to weary age. But honour thou with fitting funeral games thy comrade. I accept, well pleas'd, thy gift, my heart rejoicing that thou still retain'st of me a kindly memory, nor o'erlook'st the place of honour which among the Greeks belongs to me of right. For this the gods reward thee with a worthy recompense." He said. Achilles listened to the praise of Neleus' son, then joined the general throng. Next he set forth the prizes to reward the labours of the sturdy pugilists. A hardy mule he tether'd in the ring, unbroken, 6 years old, most hard to tame. and for the vanquish'd man a double cup. Then rose, and to the Greeks proclaim'd aloud: "Thou son of Atreus, and ye well-greav'd Greeks, for these we bid 2 champions brave stand forth, and in the boxer's manly toil contend. And he, whose stern endurance Phoebus crowns with victory, recognized by all the Greeks, he to his tent shall lead the hardy mule. The loser shall the double cup receive." He said. Up sprang Epeius, tall and stout, a boxer skill'd, the son of Panopeus, who laid his hand upon the mule, and said: "Stand forth, if any care the cup to win. The mule, methinks, no Greek can bear away from me, who glory in the champion's name. Is't not enough that in the battle-field I claim no special praise? 'Tis not for man in all things to excel. But this I say, and will make good my words: who meets me here, I mean to pound his flesh, and smash his bones. See that his seconds be at hand, and prompt to bear him from the ring, by me subdued." He said. They all in silence heard his speech. Only Euryalus, the godlike chief, son of Mecistheus, Teleon's son, stood forth opposing. He had once in Thebes joined in the funeral games of Oedipus, and there had vanquished all of Cadmean race. On him attended valiant Diomed, with cheering words and wishes of success. Around his waist he fastened first the belt, then gave the well-cut gauntlets for his hands, of wild bull's hide. When both were thus equipped, into the centre of the ring they stepped. There, face to face, with sinewy arms upraised, they stood awhile, then closed, strong hand with hand mingling in rapid interchange of blows. Dire was the clatter of their jaws, the sweat poured forth profuse from every limb. Then rush'd Epeius on, and full upon the cheek, half turn'd aside, let fall a stagg'ring blow. Nor stood Euryalus, but legs and feet knock'd from beneath him, prone to earth he fell. And as a fish that flounders on the sand, thrown by rude Boreas on the weedy beach, till cover'd o'er by the returning wave, so flounder'd he beneath that stunning blow. But brave Epeius took him by the hand, and raised him up. His comrades crowded round, and bore him from the field with dragging steps, spitting forth clotted gore, his heavy head rolling from side to side. Within his tent they laid him down, unconscious. To the ring then, back returning, bore away the cup. Achilles next before the Greeks display'd the prizes of the hardy wrestlers' skill. The victor's prize, a tripod vast, fire-proof, and at 12 oxen by the Greeks appraised, and for the vanquish'd man a female slave, priced at 4 oxen, skill'd in household work. then rose, and loudly to the Greeks proclaim'd, "Stand forth, whoe'er this contest will essay." He said, and straight uprose the giant form of Ajax Telamon. With him uprose Ulysses, skill'd in every crafty wile. Girt with the belt, within the ring they stood, and each with stalwart grasp laid hold on each, as stands two rafters of a lofty house, each propping each, by skilful architect design'd the tempest's fury to withstand. Creak'd their backbones beneath the tug and strain of those strong arms, their sweat pour'd down like rain, and bloody wheels of livid purple hue their sides and shoulders streak'd, as sternly they for victory and the well-wrought tripod strove. Nor could Ulysses Ajax overthrow, nor Ajax bring Ulysses to the ground, so stubbornly he stood. But when the Greeks were weary of the long protracted strife, thus to Ulysses mighty Ajax spoke: "Ulysses sage, Laertes' godlike son, or lift thou me, or I will thee uplift. The issue of our struggle rests with Jove." He said, and raised Ulysses from the ground. Nor he his ancient craft remember'd not, but lock'd his leg around, and striking sharp upon the hollow of the knee, the joint gave way, the giant Ajax backwards fell, Ulysses on his breast. The people saw and marvelled. Then in turn Ulysses strove Ajax to lift. A little way he moved, but fail'd to lift him fairly from the ground. Yet crook'd his knee, that both together fell, and side by side defiled with dust they lay. And now a third encounter they had tried, but rose Achilles, and the combat stay'd. "Forbear, nor waste your strength in farther strife. Ye both are victors. Both then bear away in equal meed of honour, and withdraw, that other Greeks may other contests wage." Thus spoke Achilles. They his words obey'd, and brushing off the dust, their garments donn'd. The prizes of the runners, swift of foot, Achilles next set forth. A silver bowl, 6 measures its content, for workmanship unmatch'd on earth, of Sidon's costliest art, the product rare, thence o'er the misty sea, brought by Phoenicians, who in port arriv'd, gave it to Tossus, by Euenus last, the son of Jason, to Patroclus paid, in ransom of Lycon, Priam's son, which now Achilles, on his friend's behalf, assign'd as his reward, whoe'er should prove the lightest foot and speediest in the race. A steer well fattened was the second prize, and half a talent for the third of gold. He rose, and to the Greeks proclaim'd aloud: "Stand forth, whoe'er this contest will essay." He said. Up rose Oileus' active son. Up rose Ulysses, skill'd in every wile, and noble Nestor's son, Antilochus, who all the youth in speed of foot surpassed. They stood in line. Achilles pointed out the limits of the course, as from the goal they stretched them to the race. Oileus' son first shot ahead, Ulysses following close. Nor farther than the shuttle from the breast of some fair women, when her outstretched arm has thrown the wool athwart the warp, and back withdraws it toward her breast, so close behind Ulysses pressed on Ajax, and his feet trod in his steps, ere settled yet the dust. His breath was on his shoulders, as the plain he lightly skimmed, the Greeks with eager shouts still cheering, as he strained to win the prize. But as they neared the goal, Ulysses thus to blue-eyed Pallas made his mental prayer: "Now hear me, goddess, and my feet befriend." Thus as he pray'd, his prayer the goddess heard, and all his limbs with active vigour fill'd. And as they stretch'd their hands to seize the prize, tripp'd up by Pallas, Ajax slipped and fell amid the offal of the lowing kine, which o'er Patroclus, Peleus' son, had slain. His mouth and nostrils were with offal fill'd. First in the race Ulysses bore away the silver bowl. The steer to Ajax fell, and as upon the horn he laid his hand, sputtering the offal out, he called aloud: "Lo, how the goddess has my steps bewray'd, who guards Ulysses with a mother's care." Thus as he spoke, loud laugh'd the merry Greeks. Antilochus the sole remaining prize received, and, laughing, thus the Greeks address'd: "I tell you, friends, but what yourselves do know, how of the elder men th' immortal gods take special care. For Ajax' years not much exceed my own. But here we see a man, one of former age and race of men, a hale old man we call him, but for speed not one can match him, save Achilles' self." Thus he, with praise implied of Peleus' son, to whom in answer thus Achilles spoke: "Antilochus, not unobserv'd of me, nor unrewarded shall thy praise remain. To thy half-talent add this second half." Thus saying, in his hand he placed the gold. Antilochus with joy the gift received. Next in the ring the son of Peleus laid a ponderous spear, a helmet, and a shield. The spoil Patroclus from Sarpedon won. Then rose, and loudly to the Greeks proclaim'd: "For these we call upon two champions brave to don their arms, their sharp-edged weapons grasp, and public trial of their prowess make. And he who first his rival's flesh shall reach, and through his armour piercing first draw blood, he shall this silver-studded sword receive, my trophy from Asteropaeus won, well wrought, of Thracian metal; but the arms In common property they both shall hold, and in my tent a noble banquet share." He said. Uprose great Ajax Telamon, and Tydeus' son, the valiant Diomed. First from the crowd apart they donn'd their arms. Then, eager for the fight, with haughty stare, stood in the midst. The Greeks admiring gazed. When each approaching other near they came, thrice rush'd they on, and thrice in combat closed. Then through the buckler round of Diomed great Ajax drove his spear, nor reach'd the point to Tydeus' body, but by the breastplate stay'd, while, aim'd above the mighty shield's defence, his glittering weapon flash'd at Ajax' throat. For Ajax, fearing, shouted then the Greeks to seize the fight, and share alike the prize. But from Achilles' hand the mighty sword, with belt and scabbard, Diomed received. Next in the ring the son of Peleus placed a ponderous mass of iron, as a quoit, once wielded by Aetion's giant strength, but to the ships with other trophies borne, when by Achilles' hand Aetion fell. Then rose and loudly to the Greeks proclaim'd, "Stand forth, whoe'er this contest will essay. This prize, who wins, though widely may extend his fertile fields, for 5 revolving years it will his want supply. Nor to the town, for lack of iron, with this mass in store, need he his shepherd or his ploughmen send." He said, and valiant Polypoetes rose, Epeius, and Leonteus' godlike strength, and mighty Ajax, son of Telamon. Epeius first upraised the ponderous mass, and through the air hurled it, amid the laughter of the Greeks. Next came Leonteus, scion true of Mars. The third was Ajax, from whose stalwart hand beyond the farthest mark the missile flew. But when the valiant Polypoetes took the quoit in hand, far as a herdsman throws his staff, that, whirling, flies among the herd, so far beyond the ring's extremest bound he threw the ponderous mass. Loud were the shouts, and noble Polypoetes' comrades rose, and to the ships the monarch's gift conveyed. The archers' prizes next, of iron hoar, 10 sturdy axes, double-edged, he placed, and single hatchets 10. Then far away rear'd on the sand a dark-brow'd vessel's mast, on which with slender string a timorous dove was fastened by the foot, the archer's mark. He, that who should strike the dove, should to his tent the axes bear away. But who the string should sever, but should fail to strike the bird, as less in skill the hatchets should receive. Thus spoke Achilles. Straight uprose the might of royal Teucer, and Meriones, the faithful follower of Idomeneus. They, in a brass-bound helmet, shook the lots. The first was Teucer's, with impetuous force he shot, but vow'd not to the archer king of firstling lambs a solemn hecatomb. The dove he struck not, for the archer god withheld his aid, but close beside her foot the arrow sever'd the retaining string. The bird, released, soar'd heavenward, while the string dropped from the mast suspended towards the earth, and loudly shouted their applause the Greeks. Then snatch'd Meriones in haste the bow from Teucer's hand. His own already held his arrow, pointed straight. He drew the string, and to the far-destroying king he vow'd of firstling lambs a solemn hecatomb. Aloft amid the clouds he mark'd the dove, and struck her as she soar'd beneath the wing. Right through the arrow pass'd, and to the earth returning fell beside Meriones. The bird upon the dark-prowed vessel's mast lighted a while, anon with drooping head and pinions fluttering vain, afar she fell, lifeless. The admiring crowd with wonder gazed. Meriones the axes bore away, while Teucer to the ships the hatchets bore. Last in the ring the son of Peleus laid a ponderous spear, and cauldron, burnish'd bright, priced at an ox's worth, untouch'd by fire, for those who with the javelin would contend. Up rose then Agamemnon, king of men, the son of Atreus, and Meriones, the faithful follower of Idomeneus. But Peleus' godlike son addressed them thus: "How far, Atrides, thou excell'st us all, and with the javelin, what thy pow'r and skill, preeminent, we know. Take thou this prize, and bear it to thy ships, and let us give to brave Meriones the brazen spear, if so it please thee. Such were my advice." He said, and Agamemnon, king of men, assenting, gave to brave Meriones his brazen spear, while in Talthybius' care his herald placed the king his noble prize. End of Book 23, Part 2. Book 24, Part 1 of the Iliad of Homer, rendered into English blank verse by Edward, Earl of Derby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Your reader, Michael Armenta. Argument: the redemption of the body of Hector. The gods deliberate about the redemption of Hector's body. Jupiter sends Thetis to Achilles to dispose him for the restoring it, and Iris to Priam to encourage him to go in person and treat for it. The old king, notwithstanding the remonstrances of his queen, makes ready for the journey, to which he is encouraged by an omen from Jupiter. He sets forth in his chariot with a wagon loaded with presents, under the charge of Idaeus the herald. Mercury descends in the shape of a young man, and conducts him to the pavilion of Achilles. The conversation on the way. Priam finds Achilles at his table, casts himself at his feet, and begs for the body of his son. Achilles, moved with compassion, grants his request, detains him one night in his tent, and the next morning sends him home with the body. The Trojans run out to meet him. The lamentation of Andromache, Hecuba, and Helen, with the solemnities of the funeral. The time of 12 days is employed in this book, while the body of Hector lies in the tent of Achilles, and as many more are spent in the truce allowed for his interment. The scene is partly in Achilles' camp, and partly in Troy. The games were ended, and the multitude amid the ships their several ways dispersed, some to their supper, some to gentle sleep yielding, delighted. But Achilles still mourned o'er his loved companion. Not on him lighted all-conquering sleep, but to and fro restless he tossed, and on Patroclus thought, his vigour and his courage, all the deeds they two together had achieved, the toils, the perils they had undergone, amid the strife of warriors, and the angry waves. Stirred by such memories, bitter tears he shed, now turning on his side, and now again upon his back, then prone upon his face, then starting to his feet along the shore, all objectless, despairing, would he roam. Nor did the morn above the sea appearing unmarked of him arise. His flying steeds he then would harness, and behind the car the corpse of Hector, trailing in the dust, thrice make the circuit of Patroclus' tomb. Then would he turn within his tent to rest, leaving the prostrate corpse with dust defiled. But from unseemly marks the valiant dead Apollo guarded, who with pity view'd the hero, though in death, and round him threw his golden aegis, nor, though dragg'd along, allow'd his body to receive a wound. Thus foully did Achilles in his rage misuse the mighty dead. The blessed gods with pitying grief beheld the sight, and urged that Hermes should by stealth the corpse remove. The counsel pleased the rest, but Juno still, and Neptune, and the blue-eyed maid retained the hatred, unappeased, with which of old Troy and her king and people they pursued, since Paris to the rival goddesses, who to his sheepfold came, gave deep offence, preferring her who brought him in return the fatal boon of too successful love. But when the 12th revolving day was come, Apollo thus the assembled gods addressed: "Shame on ye, gods, ungrateful! Have ye not, at Hector's hand, of bulls and choicest goats received your offerings meet? And fear ye now e'en his dead corpse to save, and grant his wife, his mother, and his child, his aged sire, and people to behold him, and to raise his funeral pyre, and with due rites entomb? But fell Achilles all your aid commands. of mind unrighteous, and inflexible his stubborn heart. His thoughts are all of blood, e'en as a lion, whom his mighty strength and dauntless courage lead to leap the fold, and 'mid the trembling flocks to seize his prey. E'en so Achilles hath discarded truth, and conscience, arbiter of good and ill. A man may lose his best lov'd friend, a son, or his own mother's son, a brother dear. He mourns and weeps, but time his grief allays, for fate to man a patient mind hath given. But godlike Hector's body, after death, Achilles, unrelenting, foully drags, lash'd to his car, around his comrade's tomb. This is not to his praise, though brave he be. Yet thus our anger he may justly rouse, who in his rage insults the senseless clay. To whom indignant white-arm'd Juno thus: "Some show of reason were there in thy speech, God of the silver bow. Could Hector boast of equal dignity with Peleus' son, a mortal one, and nurs'd at woman's breast, the other of a goddess born, whom I nurtur'd and rear'd, and to a mortal gave in marriage, gave to Peleus, best belov'd by all the immortals of the race of man. Ye gods attended all the marriage rites; thou too, companion base, false friend, wast there, and, playing on thy lyre, didst share the feast." To whom the Cloud Compeller answer'd thus: "Juno, restrain thy wrath; they shall not both attain like honour. Yet was Hector once, of all the mortals that in Ilium dwell, dearest to all the gods, and chief to me; for never did he fail his gifts to bring, and with burnt offerings and libations due my altars crown. Such worship I receiv'd. Yet shall bold Hector's body not without the knowledge of Achilles be remov'd, for day and night his goddess mother keeps her constant watch beside him. Then some God bid Thetis hither to my presence haste, and I with prudent words will counsel her, that so Achilles may at Priam's hand large ransom take, and set brave Hector free." He said, and promptly on his errand sprang the storm-swift Iris. Into the dark blue sea she plunged, midway 'twixt Imbros' rugged shore and Samos' isle. The parting waters plash'd, as down to ocean's lowest depths she dropp'd, like to a plummet which the fisherman lets fall, encased in wild bull's horn, to bear destruction to the sea's voracious tribes. There found she Thetis in a hollow cave. Around her ranged the ocean goddesses. She in the midst was weeping o'er the fate her matchless son awaiting, doom'd to die far from his home on fertile plains of Troy. Swift-footed Iris at her side appear'd, and thus address'd her: Hasten, Thetis! Jove, Lord of immortal counsel, summons thee." To whom the silver-footed goddess thus: "What would with me the mighty King of Heav'n? Press'd as I am with grief, I'm asham'd to mingle with the gods. Yet will I go, nor shall he speak in vain, whate'er his words." Thus as she spoke, her veil the goddess took, all black, than which none deeper could be found. She rose to go; the storm-swift Iris led the way before her. Ocean's parted waves around their path receded. To the beach ascending, upwards straight to heav'n they sprang. The all-seeing son of Saturn there they found, and ranged around him all the immortal gods. Pallas made way, and by the throne of Jove sat Thetis. Juno, proffering to her hand a goblet fair of gold, and adding words of welcome, she the cup received and drank. Then thus began the sire of gods and men: "Thou, Thetis, sorrowing to Olympus com'st, borne down by ceaseless grief. I know it well. Yet hear the cause for which I summon'd thee. About Achilles, thy victorious son, and valiant Hector's body. For 9 days hath contest been in heav'n, and some have urged that Hermes should by stealth the corpse remove. This to Achilles' praise I mean to turn, and thus thy reverence and thy love retain. Then haste thee to the camp, and to thy son my message bear. Tell him that all the gods are fill'd with wrath, and I above the rest am angry, that beside the beaked ships he, mad with rage, the corpse of Hector keeps. So may he fear me, and restore the dead. Iris, meantime, to Priam I will send, and bid him seek the Grecian ships, and there obtain his son's release, and with him bring such presents as may melt Achilles' heart." He said. The silver-footed queen obey'd. Down from Olympus' heights in haste she sped, and sought her son. Him found she in his tent, groaning with anguish, while his comrades round, plying their tasks, prepar'd the morning meal. For them a goodly sheep, full fleeced, was slain. Close by his side his goddess mother stood, and gently touch'd him with her hand, and said, "How long, my son, wilt thou thy soul consume with grief and mourning, mindful nor of food nor sleep? Nor dost thou wisely to abstain from woman's love? For short thy time on earth. Death and imperious fate are close at hand. Hear then my words. A messenger from Jove to thee I come, to tell thee that the gods are fill'd with wrath, and he above the rest is angry, that beside the beaked ships thou, mad with rage, the corpse of Hector keep'st. Then ransom take, and liberate the dead." To whom Achilles, swift of foot, replied. so be it. Ransom let him bring, and bear his dead away, if such the will of Jove." Thus in the concourse of the ships they two, mother and son, their lengthen'd converse held. Then Saturn's son to Iris gave command: "Haste thee, swift Iris, from Olympus' height, to Troy, to royal Priam bear my words, and bid him seek the Grecian ships, and there obtain his son's release, and with him take such presents as may melt Achilles' heart. Alone, no Trojan with him must he go, yet may a herald on his steps attend, some aged man, his smoothly rolling car and mules to drive, and to the city back to bring his dead, whom great Achilles slew. Nor let the fear of death disturb his mind. Hermes shall with him as his escort go, and to Achilles' presence safely bring, arriv'd within the tent. Nor he himself will slay him, but from others will protect. Not ignorant is he, nor void of sense, nor disobedient to the gods' behest, but will, with pitying eyes, his suppliant." He said, and on his errand sped in haste the storm-swift Iris. When to Priam's house she came, the sounds of wailing met her ear. Within the court, around their father, sat his sons, their raiment all bedew'd with tears, and in the midst, close cover'd with his robe, their sire, his head and neck with dirt defiled, which, wallowing on the earth, himself had heaped with his own hands upon his hoary head. Throughout the house his daughters loudly wailed, in memory of the many and the brave who lay in death, by Grecian warriors slain. Beside him stood the messenger of Jove, and whispered, while his limbs with terror shook: "Fear nothing, Priam, son of Dardanus, nor let thy mind be troubled. Not for ill, but here on kindly errand am I sent. To thee I come, a messenger from Jove, who from on high looks down on thee with eyes of pitying love. He bids thee ransom home the godlike Hector's corpse, and with thee take such presents as may melt Achilles' heart. Alone, no Trojan with thee must thou go, yet may a herald on thy steps attend, some aged man, thy smoothly rolling car and mules to drive, and to the city back to bring thy dead, whom great Achilles slew. Nor let the fear of death disturb thy mind. Hermes shall with thee, as thine escort, go, and to Achilles' presence safely bring. Arriv'd within the tent, nor he himself will slay thee, but from others will protect. Not ignorant is he, nor void of sense, nor disobedient to the gods' behest, but will with pitying eyes his suppliant view." Swift-footed Iris said, and vanish'd straight. He to his sons commandment gave, the mules to yoke beneath the smoothly rolling car, and on the axle fix the wicker seat. Himself the lofty cedar chamber sought, fragrant, high-roofed, with countless treasures stored, and called to Hecuba his wife, and said, "Good wife, a messenger from Jove hath come, who bids me seek the Grecian ships, and there obtain my son's release, and with me take such presents as may melt Achilles' heart. Say then, what think'st thou? For my mind inclines to seek the ships within the Grecian camp." So he. But Hecuba, lamenting, cried, "Alas, alas! Where are thy senses gone? And where the wisdom, once of high repute, mid strangers, and mid those o'er whom thou reign'st? How canst thou think alone to seek the ships, entering his presence, who thy sons hath slain, many and brave? An iron heart is thine. Of that bloodthirsty and perfidious man, if thou within the sight and reach shalt come, no pity will he feel, no reverence show. Rather remain we here apart, and mourn. For him, when at his birth his thread of life was spun by fate, 'twas destined that afar from home and parents he should glut the maw of ravening dogs by that stern warrior's tent, whose inmost heart I would I could devour. Such for my son were adequate revenge, whom not in ignominious flight he slew, but standing, thoughtless of escape or flight, for Trojan men and Troy's deep-bosom'd dames." To whom in answer Priam, godlike sire: "Seek not to hinder me, nor be thyself a bird of evil omen in my house, for thou shalt not persuade me. If indeed this message had been brought by mortal man, prophet, or seer, or sacrificing priest, I should have deemed it false, and laughed to scorn the idle tale. But now, for I myself both saw and heard the goddess, I must go, nor unfulfilled shall be the words I speak. And if indeed it be my fate to die beside the vessels of the brass-clad Greeks, I am content. By fierce Achilles' hand let me be slain. So once more in my arms I hold my boy, and give my sorrow vent." Then, raising up the coffer's polish'd lid, he chose 12 gorgeous shawls, 12 single cloaks, as many rugs, as many splendid robes, as many tunics. Then of gold he took 10 talents full, 2 tripods burnish'd bright, 4 cauldrons. Then a cup of beauty rare, a rich possession, which the men of Thrace had given, when there he went, ambassador. In this he spared not, such his keen desire, his son to ransom. From the corridor with angry words he drove the Trojans all. "Out with ye, worthless rascals, vagabonds! Have ye no griefs at home, that here ye come to pester me? Or is it not enough that Jove with deep affliction visits me, slaying my bravest son? Ye to your cost shall know his loss, since now that he is gone, the Greeks shall find you easier far to slay. But may my eyes be closed in death, ere see the city sacked and utterly destroyed." He said, and with his staff drove out the crowd. Before the old man's anger fled they all. Then to his sons in threatening tone he cried, to Paris, Helenus, and Agathon, Pammon, and Typhonus, Polites brave, Deiphobus, and bold Hippothous, and godlike Dius. All these 9, with threats and angry taunts, the aged sire assailed. "Haste, worthless sons, my scandal and my shame! Would that ye all beside the Grecian ships in Hector's stead had died! Oh, woe is me, who have begotten sons in all the land, the best and bravest! Now remains not one, Mestor and Troilus, dauntless charioteer, and Hector, who a God 'mid men appear'd, nor like a mortal's offspring, but a god's. All these hath Mars cut off, and left me none but the vile and refuse, liars all, vain skipping coxcombs, in the dance alone, and in naught else renown'd, base plunderers from their own countrymen of lambs and kids. When, laggards, will ye harness me the car, equipp'd with all things needed for the way?" He said. They quailed beneath their father's wrath, and brought the smoothly running mule wain out, well fram'd, new built, and fix'd the wicker seat. Then from the peg the mule yoke down they took, of boxwood wrought, with boss and rings complete, and with the yoke band brought they forth, 9 cubits long, and to the polish'd pole at the far end attach'd. The breast rings then fix'd to the pole piece, and on either side thrice round the knob the leathern thong they wound, and bound it fast, and inward turn'd the tongue. Then the rich ransom from the chambers bought of Hector's head upon the wain they piled, and yoked the strong-hoofed mules, to harness train'd, the Mysians' splendid present to the king. To Priam's car they harness'd then the steeds, which he himself at polish'd manger fed, deep thoughts revolving in the lofty halls where met the herald and the aged king. When Hecuba with troubled mind drew near, in her right hand a golden cup she bore of luscious wine, that ere they took their way, they to the gods might due libations pour. Before the car she stood, and thus she spoke: "Take, and to Father Jove thine offering pour, and pray that he may bring thee safely home from all thy foes, since sore against my will thou needst wilt venture to the ships of Greece." Then to Idaean Jove, the cloud-girt son of Saturn, who the expanse of Troy surveys, prefer thy prayer, beseeching him to send on thy right hand a winged messenger, the bird he loves the best, of strongest flight, that thou thyself mayst see and know the sign, and firm in faith approach the ships of Greece. But should all-seeing Jove the sign withhold, then not with my consent shouldst thou attempt, whate'er thy wish, to reach the Grecian ships." To whom in answer godlike Priam thus: "O woman, I refuse not to obey thy counsel. Good it is to raise the hands in prayer to heaven, and Jove's protection seek." The old man said, and bade the attendant pour pure water on his hands. With ewer she, and basin, stood beside him. From his wife, the due ablutions made, he took the cup. Then in the centre of the court he stood, and as he poured the wine, looked up to heaven, and thus with voice uplifted prayed aloud: "O Father Jove, who rul'st on Ida's height, most great, most glorious, grant that I may find some pity in Achilles' heart, and send on my right hand a winged messenger, the bird thou lov'st the best, of strongest flight, that I myself may see and know the sign, and firm in faith approach the ships of Greece." Thus as he prayed, the Lord of counsel heard, and sent forthwith an eagle, feather'd king, dark bird of chase, and Dusky thence surnamed. Wide as the portals, well secur'd with bolts, that guard some wealthy monarch's lofty hall, on either side his ample pinions spread. On the right hand appear'd he, far above the city, soaring. They the fav'ring sign with joy beheld, and every heart was cheer'd. Mounting his car, in haste, the aged king drove through the court, and through the echoing porch. The mules in front, by sage Idaeus driven, that drew the four-wheel'd wain. Behind them came the horses, down the city's steep descent, urged by the old man to speed. The crowd of friends that followed mourned for him as doom'd to death. Descended from the city to the plain, his sons and sons-in-law to Ilium took their homeward way. Advancing o'er the plain, they too escaped not Jove's all-seeing eye. Pitying, he saw the aged sire, and thus at once to Hermes spoke, his much-lov'd son: "Hermes, for thou in social converse lov'st to mix with men, and hear'st whome'er thou wilt, haste thee, and Priam, to the Grecian ships so lead, that none of all the Greeks may see, ere at Achilles' presence he attain. He said, nor disobey'd the heavenly guide. His golden sandals on his feet he bound, ambrosial work, which bore him o'er the waves, swift as the wind, and o'er the wide-spread earth. Then took his rod, wherewith he seals at will the eyes of men, and wakes again from sleep. This in his hand he bore, and sprang for flight. Soon the wide-spread Hellespont he reach'd, and Troy, and pass'd in likeness of a princely youth in opening manhood, fairest term of life. The twain had pass'd by Ilus' lofty tomb, and halted there the horses and the mules beside the margin of the stream to drink, for darkness now was creeping o'er the earth. When through the gloom the herald Hermes saw approaching near, to Priam thus he cried, "O son of Dardanus, bethink ye well, of prudent counsel great is now our need. A man I see, and fear he means us ill. Say, with the horses shall we fly at once, or clasp his knees, and for his mercy sue?" The old man heard, his mind confused with dread. So grievously he fear'd, that every hair upon his bended limbs did stand on end. He stood astounded. But the guardian God approach'd, and took him by the hand, and said, "Where, father, goest thou, thus with horse and mule, in the still night, when men are sunk in sleep? And fearest thou not the slaughter-breathing Greeks, thine unrelenting foes, and they so near? If any one of them should see thee now, so richly laden in the gloom of night, how wouldst thou feel? Thou art young thyself, and this old man, thy comrade, would avail but little to protect thee from assault. I will not harm thee, nay, will shield from harm, for like my father's is, methinks, thy face." To whom in answer Priam, godlike sire: "'Tis as thou say'st, fair son; yet hath some God extended o'er me his protecting hand, who sends me such a guide, so opportune. Bless'd are thy parents in a son so grac'd, in face and presence, and of a mind so wise." To whom in answer thus the guardian God: "O father, well and wisely dost thou speak. But tell me this, and truly, dost thou bear these wealthy treasures to some foreign land, that they for thee in safety may be stored? Or have ye all resolved to fly from Troy in fear, your bravest slain, thy gallant son, who never from the Greeks' encounter flinch'd?" To whom in answer Priam, godlike sire: "Who art thou, noble sir, and what thy race, that speak'st thus fairly of my hapless son?" To whom in answer thus the guardian God: "Try me, old man, of godlike Hector ask. For often in the glory-giving fight these eyes have seen him, chief, when to the ships the Greeks he drove, and with the sword destroyed. We gazed in wonder, from the fight restrained by Peleus' son, with Agamemnon wroth. His follower I, one ship convey'd us both. One of the Myrmidons I am, my sire Polyctor, rich, but aged, e'en as thou. 6 sons he hath, besides myself, the 7th, and I by lot was drafted for the war. I from the ships am to the plain come forth, for with the dawn of day the keen-eyed Greeks will round the city marshal their array. They chafe in idleness, the chiefs in vain strive to restrain their ardour for the fight. To whom in answer Priam, godlike sire: If from Achilles, Peleus' son, thou art indeed a follower, tell me all the truth. Lies yet my son beside the Grecian ships, or hath Achilles torn him limb from limb, and to his dogs the mangled carcass given? To whom in answer thus the guardian God: On him, old man, nor dogs nor birds have fed, but by the ship of Peleus' son he lies within the tent. 12 days he there hath lain, nor hath corruption touch'd his flesh, nor worms that wont to prey on men in battle slain. The corpse indeed, with each returning morn, around his comrade's tomb Achilles drags, yet leaves it still uninjured. Thou thyself mightst see how fresh, as dew besprent, he lies, from bloodstains cleansed, and closed his many wounds. For many a lance was buried in his corpse. So e'en in death the blessed gods above, who loved him well, protect thy noble son. He said. The old man, rejoicing, heard his words, and answered: See, my son, how good it is to give the immortal gods their tribute due. For never did my son, while yet he lived, neglect the gods who on Olympus dwell, and thence have they remembered him in death. Accept, I pray, this goblet, rich embossed. Be thou my guard, and under heaven my guide, until I reach the tent of Peleus' son. To whom in answer thus the guardian God: Old father, me thy younger wouldst thou tempt in vain, who bidst me at thy hands accept thy proffered presents. To Achilles' wrong I dread his anger, and hold it shame to plunder him, though through fear of future ill. But as thy guide, I could conduct thee safe as far as Argos, journeying by thy side, on shipboard or on foot, nor by the fault of thy conductor shouldst thou meet with harm. Thus spoke the guardian God, and on the car mounting in haste, he took the whip and reins, and with fresh vigour mules and horses filled. When to the ship towers and the trench they came, the guard had late been busied with their meal, and with deep sleep the heavenly guide o'erspread the eyes of all. Then opened wide the gates, and pushed aside the bolts, and led within both Priam and the treasure-laden wain. But when they reached Achilles' lofty tent, which for their king the Myrmidons had built, of fir trees felled, and overlaid the roof with rushes mown from off the neighbouring mead, and all around a spacious court enclosed with cross-set palisades. A single bar of fir the gateway guarded, which to shut 3 men of all the others scarce sufficed, and 3 to open. But Achilles' hand, unaided, shut with ease the massive bar. Then for the old man Hermes oped the gate, and brought him within the court the gifts designed for Peleus' godlike son. Then from the car sprang to the ground, and thus to Priam spoke. "Old man, a God hath hither been thy guide. Hermes I am, and sent to thee from Jove, father of all, to bring thee safely here. I now return, nor to Achilles' eyes will I appear. Beseems it not a God to greet a mortal in the sight of all? Go thou in, and clasp Achilles' knees, and supplicate him for his father's sake, his fair-haired mother's, and his child's, that so thy words may stir an answer in his heart." Thus saying, Hermes to Olympus' heights returned, and Priam from his chariot sprang, and left Idaeus there in charge to keep the horses and the mules, while he himself entered the dwelling straight, where wont to sit Achilles, loved of heaven. The chief he found within, his followers seated all apart. 2 only in his presence minister'd, the brave Automedon and Alcimus, a warrior bold. Scarce ended the repast of food and wine, the table still was set. Great Priam enter'd, unperceived of all, and, standing by Achilles, with his arms embraced his knees, and kissed those fearful hands, blood-stained, which many of his sons had slain. As when a man, by cruel fate pursued, in his own land hath shed another's blood, and, flying, seeks beneath some wealthy house a foreign refuge, wondering all behold. On godlike Priam so with wonder gazed Achilles. Wonder seized the attendants all, and one to other looked. Then Priam thus to Peleus' son his suppliant speech addressed: "Think, great Achilles, rival of the gods, upon thy father, e'en as I myself upon the threshold of unjoyous age. And haply he from them that dwell around may suffer wrong, with no protector near to give him aid. Yet he, rejoicing, knows that thou still liv'st, and day by day may hope to see his son returning safe from Troy, while I, all hapless, that have many sons, the best and bravest through the breadth of Troy begotten, deem that none are left me now. 50 there were, when came the sons of Greece, 19 the offspring of a single womb, the rest the women of my household bore. Of these have many by relentless Mars been laid in the dust, but he, my only one, the city's and his brethren's sole defence, he, bravely fighting in his country's cause, Hector, but lately by thy hand hath fallen. On his behalf I venture to approach the Grecian ships, for his release to thee to make my prayer, and priceless ransom pay. Then thou, Achilles, reverence the gods, and for thy father's sake look pitying down on me, more needing pity, since I bear such grief as never man on earth hath borne, who stoop to kiss the hand that slew my son." Thus as he spoke, within Achilles' breast fond memory of his father rose. He touched the old man's hand, and gently put him by. Then wept they both, by various memories stirred. One, prostrate at Achilles' feet, bewailed his warrior son, Achilles for his sire, and for Patroclus wept, his comrade dear. And through the house their weeping loud was heard. End of Book 24. Book 24, Part 2 of the Iliad of Homer, rendered into English blank verse by Edward, Earl of Derby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Your reader, Michael Armenta. But when Achilles had indulged his grief, and eased the yearning of his heart and limbs, uprising, with his hand the aged sire, pitying his hoary head and hoary beard, he raised, and thus with gentle words addressed: "Alas, what sorrows, poor old man, are thine! How couldst thou venture to the Grecian ships alone, and to the presence of the man whose hand hath slain so many of thy sons, many and brave? An iron heart is thine. But sit thou on this seat, and in our hearts, though filled with grief, let us that grief suppress, for woeful lamentation naught avails. Such is the thread the gods for mortals spin, to live in woe, while they from cares are free. 2 coffers lie beside the door of Jove, with gifts for man, one good, the other ill, to whom from each the Lord of lightning gives. Him sometimes evil, sometimes good befalls. To whom the ill alone, him foul disgrace and grinding misery o'er the earth pursue. By God and man alike despised he roams. Thus from his birth the gods to Peleus gave excellent gifts, with wealth and substance bless'd above his fellows. O'er the Myrmidons he ruled with sovereign sway, and heav'n bestow'd on him a mortal, an immortal bride. Yet this of ill was mingled in his lot, that in his house no rising race he saw of future kings. One only son he had, one doom'd to early death. Nor is it mine to tend my father's age, but far from home thee and thy sons in Troy I vex with war. Much have we heard too of thy former wealth. Above what Lesbos northward Macar's seat contains, and Upper Phrygia, and the shores of boundless Hellespont, 'tis said that thou in wealth and number of thy sons wast bless'd. But since on thee this curse the gods have brought, still round thy city war and murder rage. Bear up, nor thus with grief incessant mourn. Vain is thy sorrow for thy gallant son. Thou canst not raise him, and mayst suffer more. To whom in answer Priam, godlike sire: Tell me not yet, illustrious chief, to sit while Hector lies uncared for in the tent, but let me quickly go, that with mine eyes I may behold my son. And thou accept the ample treasures which we tender thee, mayst thou enjoy them, and in safety reach thy native land, since thou hast spared my life, and bidst me still behold the light of heaven. To whom Achilles thus with stern regard: Old man, incense me not. I mean myself to give thee back thy son. For here of late, dispatch'd by Jove, my goddess mother came, the daughter of the aged ocean god. And thee too, Priam, well I know, some god, I cannot err, hath guided to our ships. No mortal, though in vent'rous youth, would dare our camp to enter, nor could hope to pass unnoticed by the watch, nor easily remove the ponderous bar that guards our doors. But stir not up my anger in my grief, lest, suppliant though thou be, within my tent I brook thee not, and Jove's command transgress." He said. The old man trembled and obeyed. Then to the doorway, with a lion's spring, Achilles rush'd, not unaccompanied; with him Automedon and Elymus, his two attendants, of his followers all, next to the lost Patroclus, best esteem'd. They from the yoke the mules and horses loos'd, then led the herald of the old man in, and bade him sit, and from the polish'd wain the costly ransom took of Hector's head. 2 robes they left, and 1 well-woven vest to clothe the corpse, and send with honour home. Then to the female slaves he gave command to wash the body, and anoint with oil, apart, that Priam not see his son, lest his grieved heart its passion unrestrained should utter, and Achilles, roused to wrath, his suppliant slay, and Jove's command transgress. When they had wash'd the body, and with oil anointed, and around it wrapped the robe and vest, Achilles lifted up the dead with his own hands, and laid him on the couch, which to the polish'd wain his followers raised. Then, groaning, on his friend by name he called. "Forgive, Patroclus, be not wroth with me, if, in the realm of darkness, thou shouldst hear that godlike Hector to his father's arms for no mean ransom I restore, whereof a fitting share for thee I set aside." This said, Achilles to the tent return'd. On the carved couch, from whence he rose, he sat beside the wall, and thus to Priam spoke: "Old man, thy son, according to thy prayer, is given thee back. Upon the couch he lies. Thyself shalt see him at the dawn of day. Meanwhile the evening meal demands our care. Not fair-hair'd Niobe abstain'd from food when in the house her children lay in death. 6 beauteous daughters, and 6 stalwart sons. The youths Apollo with his silver bow, the maids the archer queen Diana slew, with anger fill'd that Niobe presum'd herself with fair Latona to compare, her many children with her rivals 2. So by the 2 were all the many slain. 9 days in death they lay, and none was there to pay their funeral rites. For Saturn's son had given to all the people hearts of stone. At length the immortal gods entomb'd the dead, nor yet did Niobe, when now her grief had worn itself in tears, from food refrain. And now in Sipylus, amid the rocks and lonely mountains, where the goddess nymphs that love to dance by Achelous' stream, 'tis said, were cradled, she, though turn'd to stone, broods o'er the wrongs inflicted by the gods. So we too, godlike sire, the meal may share, and later thou thy noble son mayst mourn, to Troy restor'd. Well worthy he thy tears." This said, he slaughter'd straight a white-fleeced sheep. His comrades then the carcass flay'd and dress'd, the meat prepar'd, and, fasten'd to the spits, roasted with care, and from the fire withdrew. The bread Automedon from baskets fair apportion'd out. The meat Achilles shared. They on the viands set before them fell. The rage of thirst and hunger satisfied, in wonder Priam on Achilles gazed, his form and stature, as a god he seem'd. And he too look'd on Priam, and admir'd his venerable face and gracious speech. With mutual pleasure each on other gazed, till godlike Priam first address'd his host: "Dismiss me now, illustrious chief, to rest, and lie we down, in gentle slumbers wrapp'd. For never have mine eyes been closed in sleep, since by thy hand my gallant son was slain. But groaning still I brood upon my woes, and in my court with dust my head defile. Now have I tasted bread, now ruddy wine hath o'er my palate pass'd, but not till now." Thus he. His comrades and the attendant maids Achilles order'd in the corridor 2 mattresses to place, with blankets fair of purple wool o'erlaid, and on the top rugs and soft sheets for upper covering spread. They from the chamber, torch in hand, withdrew, and with obedient haste 2 beds prepar'd. Then thus Achilles spoke in jesting tone: "Thou needs must sleep without, my good old friend, lest any leader of the Greeks should come, as is their custom, to confer with me. Of them whosoe'er shall find thee here by night, forthwith to Agamemnon would report, and Hector might not be so soon restor'd. But tell me truly this, how many days for godlike Hector's funeral rites ye need, that for so long a time I may myself refrain from combat, and the people stay?" To whom in answer Priam, godlike sire: "If by thy leave we may indeed perform his funeral rites, to thee, Achilles, great will be our gratitude, if this thou grant. Thou know'st how close the town is hemm'd around, and from the mountain, distant as it is, the Trojans well may fear to draw the wood. 9 days to public mourning would we give, the 10th to funeral rites and funeral feast. Then on the 11th would we raise his mound, the 12th renew the war, if needs we must." To whom Achilles, swift of foot, replied: "So shall it be, old Priam. I engage to stay the battle for the time required." Thus speaking, with his hand the old man's wrist he grasped, in token that he need not fear. Then in the corridor lay down to rest old Priam and the herald, elders sage, while in his tent's recess Achilles slept, the fair Briseis resting by his side. In night-long slumbers lay the other gods and helmet chiefs, by gentle sleep subdued. But on the eyes of Hermes, guardian god, no slumber fell, deep pondering in his mind how from the ships in safety to conduct the royal Priam, and the guard elude. Above the sleeper's head he stood, and cried: "Old man, small heed thou tak'st of coming ill, who, when Achilles gives thee leave to go, sleep'st undisturbed, surrounded by thy foes. Thy son hath been restor'd, and thou hast paid a generous price; but to redeem thy life, if Agamemnon and the other Greeks should know that thou art here, full thrice so much thy sons, who yet are left, would have to pay." He said. The old man trembled, and aroused the herald, while the horses and the mules were yoked by Hermes, who with silent speed drove through the encampment, unobserved of all. But when they came to eddying Xanthus' ford, fair flowing stream, born of immortal Jove, to high Olympus Hermes took his flight, as morn in saffron robe o'er all the earth was light diffusing. They with funeral wail drove cityward the horses. Following came the mules that drew the litter of the dead. The plain they traversed o'er, observed of none, or man or woman, till Cassandra fair as golden Venus, from the topmost height of Pergamus, her father in his car upstanding saw. The herald at his side him too she saw, who on the litter lay. Then lifted up her voice, and cried aloud to all the city, "Hither, Trojans, come, both men and women! Hector see, restor'd! If while he liv'd, returning from the fight, ye met him e'er rejoicing, who indeed was all the city's chiefest joy and pride." She said, nor man nor woman then was left within the city. O'er the minds of all grief pass'd, resistless. To the gates in throngs they press'd, to crowd round him who brought the dead. The first to clasp the body were his wife and honour'd mother. Eagerly they sprang on the smooth rolling wain to touch the head of Hector. Round them, weeping, stood the crowd, weeping, till sunset all the livelong day had they before the gates for Hector mourn'd, had not old Priam from the car address'd the crowd. "Make way, that so the mules may pass. When to my house I shall have brought my dead, ye there may vent your sorrow as ye will." Thus as he spoke, obedient to his word, they stood aside, and for the car made way. But when to Priam's lordly house they came, they laid him on a rich wrought couch, and called the minstrels in, who by the hero's bed should lead the melancholy chorus. They pour'd forth the music of the mournful dirge, while women's voices join'd in loud lament. White-arm'd Andromache the wail began, the head of Hector clasping in her hands. "My husband, thou art gone in pride of youth, and in thine house hast left me desolate. Thy child an infant still, thy child and mine, unhappy parents both! Nor dare I hope that he may reach the ripeness of his youth, for ere that day shall Troy in ruin fall, since thou art gone, her guardian, thou whose arm defended her, her wives, and helpless babes. They now shall shortly o'er the sea be borne, and with them I shall go. Thou too, my child, must follow me, to servile labour doom'd, the suff'ring victim of a tyrant lord, unless perchance some angry Greek may seize and dash thee from the tower, a woeful death. Whose brother, or whose father, or whose son by Hector hath been slain, for many a Greek by Hector's hand hath bit the bloody dust, not light in battle was thy father's hand. Therefore for him the gen'ral city mourns. Thou to thy parents' bitter grief hast caused, Hector, but bitterest grief of all hast left to me. For not to me was given to clasp the hand extended from thy dying bed, nor words of wisdom catch, which night and day with tears I might have treasured in my heart." Weeping she spoke, the women join'd her wail. Then Hecuba took up the loud lament. Hector, of all my children dearest thou, dear to the immortals too, in life wast thou, and they in death have borne thee still in mind. For other of my sons, his captives made, across the watery waste to Samos' isle, or Imbros, or the inhospitable shore of Lemnos, hath Achilles, swift of foot, to slavery sold. Thee, when his sharp-edged spear hath robb'd thee of thy life, he dragg'd indeed around Patroclus' tomb, his comrade dear, whom thou hadst slain. Yet so he raised not up his dead to life again. Now liest thou there, all fresh and fair, as dew besprent, like one whom bright Apollo, with his arrows keen, God of the silver bow, hath newly slain. Weeping she spoke, and roused the general grief. Then Helen third the mournful strain renew'd. Hector, of all my brethren dearest thou, true godlike Paris claims me as his wife, who bore me hither. Would I then had died! But 20 years have pass'd since here I came, and left my native land. Yet ne'er from thee I heard one scornful, one degrading word, as when from others I have borne reproach, thy brothers, sisters, or thy brothers' wives, or mother. For thy sire was ever kind, e'en as a father. Thou hast check'd them still with tender feeling, and with gentle words. For thee I weep, and for myself no less. For, through the breadth of Troy, none love me now, none kindly look on me, but all abhor." Weeping she spoke, and with her wept the crowd. At length the aged Priam gave command: "Haste now, ye Trojans, to the city bring good store of fuel. Fear no treach'rous wile, for when he sent me from the dark-ribb'd ships, Achilles promised that from hostile arms till the 12th morn we should no harm sustain." He said, and they the oxen and the mules yoked to the wains, and from the city thronged. 9 days they labour'd, and brought back to Troy good store of wood. But when the 10th day's light upon the earth appear'd, weeping they bore brave Hector out, and on the funeral pile, laying the glorious dead, applied the torch. While yet the rosy-finger'd morn was young, round noble Hector's pyre the people press'd. When all were gather'd round, and closely thronged, first on the burning mass, as far as spread the range of fire, they pour'd the ruddy wine, and quench'd the flames. His brethren then, and friends, weeping, the hot tears flowing down their cheeks, collected from the pile the whitened bones. These in a golden casket they enclosed, and o'er it spread soft shawls of purple dye. Then in a grave they laid it, and in haste with stone in ponderous masses covered o'er, and raised a mound, and watched on every side from sudden inroad of the Greeks to guard. The mound erected, back they turned, and all, assembled duly, shared the solemn feast in Priam's palace, heaven-descended king. Such were the rites to glorious Hector paid. End of Book 24, Part 2. End of the Iliad of Homer, rendered into English blank verse by Edward, Earl of Derby. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.